he's running level with me, and I'm just going, that's it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is it. This is it. This is it. I'm dead.
We're inside the shelter with our guns, and
Sure.
we're ready to shoot our way out if we have to, but you don't know, again, at that time, we didn't know if they was arguing with each other about who's going to come in after us, or if they were arguing about who's going to get the food that we left out, or...
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an epic show ahead, but just remember, if any of you have experiences you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can either email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com or head over to paranormalportal.net and scroll down and find the button that says Interview Me, and that'll allow you to look at a calendar of possible times and dates and find a date that works for you. Love to hear your stories, so definitely get in touch with me. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and thank you so much for joining me as we dive into yet again another amazing episode. I want to wish you all, first and foremost, a happy holidays. Whatever it is you observe, however you observe it, I hope during the next several days you have an opportunity to get together with those you love and be close and share laughter and have some wonderful times. It's just so important nowadays, I think, especially with all of the heaviness of the world around us, that we certainly make an extra effort to celebrate these times and remember what's important. So I hope that you're all able to do that. And I want to say a sincere thank you for all the love and support that you all continue to give and bring to the shows. All of the spreading of the word, letting other people know that we're out there doing this has been incredible. It's been fantastic to watch this all grow. And I don't advertise anywhere, so any growth is truly very grassroots. It's you guys letting each other know. And I can't thank you enough for that, because I don't think there's any better endorsement in the entire world than having someone say, hey, I love this show, you got to check it out. I know personally, if I catch an ad, I'm most likely never going to respond to it. But if someone I like says to me, hey, I caught this amazing show, you got to check it out, I'm very likely to do that. And I know there's several of you out there doing that. So thank you so much for that. Your efforts have definitely manifest in the continued growth of the portal. And I am absolutely humbled and honored and that you enjoy the shows. Now, tonight, what we're going to do on the show is a first ever for the Paranormal Portal, and that is we're going to do kind of a retrospective, if you will, highlighting 3 prior shows that we've done from season 1. And the reason that I wanted to do this is it's not because I had nothing else to do, but I know that with our audience continuing to grow, a lot of you are coming in and just coming in and listening when you entered and continuing from there. And there's an entire 5-year back catalog of our shows that I think are some incredible shows. And I love all of them. I'm very proud of all of them. But I just wanted to take a moment to highlight a few of them tonight and hopefully encourage you to go back and check some of those older catalog. There's some amazing interviews. There's some amazing moments, people sharing their stories and their experiences that remain a part of me, as I go forward. It's like these stories are so incredibly powerful. And I'm absolutely honored that so many people have taken the time and desired to come on the show and share their experiences. So I hope that you guys, as you are becoming introduced to the show, are going back to the older episodes and having a listen, because I think every one of these seasons prior to this are some of the greatest things ever. And I'm extraordinarily proud of what we've done. And I think you're going to love those old episodes. So give them a listen. But tonight we're going to revisit the first time that Wes came on the show. And he was my guest on the podcast, on the Paranormal Portal. And that episode covers an incredible story, not just about, during that episode, we talked about Sasquatch plenty, but Wes also shared with me off air a story that he was told by some military colonel who was like a Green Beret or Special Forces that was served in Nam, of his encounter being called to an area that was allegedly off limits by the UN and all the other special organizational branches. I don't know who decides where people can fight and where they can't, but there was allegedly an area of the map of Vietnam that was off limits to all, and they were called to an area up in Vietnam there where they dealt and saw firsthand an attack by a couple of giants. Now, if you've heard the Giant of Kandahar story, that, of course, is pretty powerful and incredible, and it is a more modern example of people coming face-to-face with giants. There is the Lovelock Cave incident dealing with, I think it was the Cherokee that trapped the red-haired giants in the ground and basically smoked them out, built fires in all the entrances and smoked them out and trapped them in there until they suffocated because of ongoing disputes and issues dealing with them and their very aggressive nature. So this isn't a bit newer than the Lovelock Cave, but older than the Kandahar giants, but it does show that allegedly there are giants out there. And we're going to get into that one. You're going to listen to that one on this episode. An incredibly, I guess, both shocking and tragic story. And you'll understand what I mean when you listen. We're also going to revisit an interview I did with Ron Morehead as he was discussing the Sierra sounds. And Ron is one of those incredible people that was really on the forefront and really, I guess, kind of just stumbled into all of this. He wasn't looking for the world of Bigfoot or to be involved with it, but he kind of stumbled right into it. So Ron came on and was an amazing guy. If you've not talked to Ron Morehead or heard him talk, you should hear him talk because his stories and experiences are absolutely incredible, as well as his work going forward and researching this and researching possibilities of what these Bigfoot Sasquatch might be. And then the third issue that we're going to revisit from season 1 was an interview I did with Dean Harrison of Australia Yowie Research. And Dean researches the Yowies over there, which is, of course, Australia's version of the Bigfoots. And he talks about, I think this was his first real face-to-face example of being in close proximity and at great danger of what he says is a Yowie. So these are three incredible stories, and I just it's hard to go through and pick just three of anything because I literally could just say listen to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and just go up the list because every episode has been absolutely leaving me gobsmacked, for lack of a better term, and so I hope you guys enjoy these. And again, it's the first time I've ever done it on the show, but it's meant to highlight these older episodes that are still absolutely powerful and stand on their own 2 feet and have some incredible information and messages just waiting for you. So let's get to it. So the first episode we're going to visit tonight is from season 1. And it's episodes 147 and 148. It was a 2-part episode. And it was our first chance interviewing Ron on the show. And he came on and talked about the Sierra Sounds. Now, if you're not familiar with the backstory on this, let me just give you the 30,000-foot view, as they say. And Ron was going up to do some hunting in the Sierra Nevada mountains and was called up to a friend's property up there. And when he got there, of course, that's when they were hearing these strange voices. And this recording, the clip that I feature does feature at least one of, I think it's just one of the recordings that Ron had of the actual Sierra sounds. And that the Sierra sounds are basically just recordings of what is believed to be a robust and comprehensive Bigfoot language. And it's kind of creepy. It's really kind of bizarre to listen to, but it's very well might be some of the first recordings ever made of their dialogue. And it's quite bizarre and unusual, but this is a great interview with Ron, and it was a pleasure, absolute honor to talk to him. And he's since come on the show again, but I'm going to have to get Ron back again because he's still out there and at it and digging for answers. And so I would encourage you to, if not checking out these, check out at least some of his work online and in other interviews, because Ron is really and truly a pivotal character in all of the Bigfoot research world and has done amazing things in at least substantiating that there's a language, and which does promote the idea that these are an intelligent species. These are not just, apes. They are something more. So check it out, and you'll see what I mean. But I guess it should start with the Sierra sounds. This is the recordings that you and your partners made up in the Sierra Mountains. Walk us through that if you would, please.
Yeah, we were all recording. I mean, once the Johnson brothers, who have been frequenting that camp for hunting since 1958, they didn't know what to think of these sounds that started up around the site up there in 71. And when they went out later and seen this big track, well, they realized there's something out there that's not a bear. It's something very unusual. Mm-hmm. So they went back in this little hutchie shelter that we got up there and hovered over in there all night long. They had guns. They always carry guns. We all carry guns. That's no big deal, because it's a hunting camp. That's what you do when you're hunting. And anyway, they came out and told us the story. The guys went back. I didn't go back at the first time because I wasn't part of the group. I was just their friends, but I wasn't a hunter then. But I figured one of the guys, he got scared off, and he just wouldn't go back by himself. So the guys were late coming out, and the women were worried, the wives were worried. So he asked me if I'd accompany him up there to see if the guys are okay, because at that time, didn't know what they were dealing with, because they're very aggressive soundings. The first ones were very aggressive, and it kind of makes you wonder if they're arguing over who's going to eat you first or what's going to happen. You don't know. Yeah. You don't know what kind of monster you're dealing with if you think it's a monster, because you just don't know. So anyway, I went back up there with him. He about killed me getting me in there because I thought I was in shape. But man, that's a trip. And about 8 miles back into the wilderness, and there's 5 of us all together, 6, I guess, once Al Berry, which next year we got a hold of Alan Berry, who was investigative reporter. Actually, that's through Ivan Sanderson, a cryptozoologist. Warren Johnson, the leader of our group, he passed away now, but he wrote Ivan Sanderson a 23-page handwritten letter and told him about what was going on. And I got a hold of the letter that Ivan Sanderson sent to Peter Byrne right after that and said, you might want to check this out. Peter Byrne's in Oregon. Okay. And Peter Byrne thought it was probably a hoax too, just like Ivan Sanderson did, just too incredible. And so Peter, knowing Al Berry, who lived in California, got a hold of him and said, you want to go down and talk to these guys? Probably nothing to it, but you might want to check it out. So he came down and interviewed us all separately together and heard the sounds that we had ended up recording after all this started. We went a couple of recorders. And anyway, we invited him in 1972 after the snow melted and we get in. The camp's 8,400 feet high in the Sierra Nevada mountains. There's a lot of snow up there. As much as 20 feet up there, some or more. Oh, geez. And once it melts, April, May, something like that, we can get in. So we went back. He went back, and he started frequenting the camp as often as he could. But he had a day job too in Redding, California, as a newspaper reporter at the time. And he ended up trying to find the hoax. Who could be pulling this off? Because these things started making their sounds when they come in at night, and he just was trying to find who could be pulling this off, and he was looking for a hoax all this time. We didn't know that. We really didn't. None of us knew that we thought he was just being friendly and wanted to explore this thing like we were.
Sure.
We were just novelists, underestimating what they were at the time, thinking they're just some unidentified ape running around out there. But we knew they were chattering amongst themselves. And later I found out that Albert Ostman, who was written about in John Green's book, The Apes Among Us, he said they were chattering amongst themselves when he got kidnapped and was held up for 6 days up in British Columbia. So he said they were chattering amongst themselves. So it was held by a male, a female, and 2 adolescents, and he escaped, gave his report, and it's deemed pretty credible by everybody that's read it. And of course, John Green thought it was totally convinced that it was true. I went up there years later, 1996. Actually, I flew in there with my plane with Peter Byrne and Al Berry and a photographer or videographer, trying to explore the Toba Inlet. That's where he was. Yeah. And we couldn't determine the bowl where he said he was kept in. He said he was kept in about a 10-acre bowl of mountains, and there's only one way out. And so a lot of people who've researched this at all know the story, so I don't need to go into great detail. But anyway, that was the kind of sound right, because he said we were chattering amongst themselves. Well, that's what they do. They chatter really rapidly. Right. And we found out later on in 2008 when the cryptologist got a hold of our recordings and come out and interviewed us. He studied them like Dr. Curlin did originally to find out they were true. They weren't manipulated in any way. They weren't speeded up. They weren't slowed down. They were real. And Al Berry fostered that study, actually, at the University of Wyoming. So there's been a lot of credibility behind them because of the Al Berry, basically. He's the one who later on became a good friend of mine, and we started talking together and going out. But the cryptolinguist, Scott Nelson, determined they have a language by the human definition of language. And that's important, because language we didn't think about it then. We didn't think about a lot of things back then. We just kind of having fun with it after we got to pass the scare factor. That's important, by the way, the fear factor. Gets you these sounds when they're right just a few feet away from you outside the shelter, Yeah. And anyway, he said they have language, a complex language by the human definition of language. That means, very important, that means they have what they call a morpheme stream of words that fit together in a sapient sentence. And you got that kind of stuff going on. Only humans are supposed to have that, according to Dr. Lieberman. In 1968, he wrote a paper and said that only humans have the capability of speech like we do. It takes the hyoid bone up here, specifically tied to the nerves of the tongue and into the brain to create what we're doing right now, sapient speech. Sure. And these things have that, and only humans are supposed to have that. So what does that tell us there? Right. It kind of tells me that there may be a human component to these things. And of course, you don't find this out till years later. You're really starting to look into everything, and so that's how it kind of began with me and the other guys, and some of them passed away now. I just talked to Bill McDowell. He's my good friend in California, and he's still doing well. He was my packing buddy. Him and I had the horses and mules and packed the supplies in and out up there. So anyway, it's been fun. It still is fun. I'm enjoying this. I enjoy doing what I'm doing right now, and I thank you again for having me on.
Oh, sure. Now, I think this would probably be a good point to start playing at least a few of these sounds. I think they're absolutely they're frightening a little bit, and they're exciting a little bit. they are just such a different. I don't know.
They're kind of spread out over from 71 through 74. Okay. They stopped interacting with us real close up, interacting with us in 1976 when we had to shoot a bear right there in camp who was tearing us up, and he actually, which is unusual for black bears, but he came at us, and we had tried to shoot him off a few times, but he was tearing up our sacks, our pack sacks. Sure. We hauled in on the mules of food, and anyway, we shot him. And, that stopped the close-up stuff. I don't know if that's what stopped it or if they just got bored with us, but something stopped it.
Okay. Well, the first one that I'm going to play, you've titled Rapid Fire Sequence. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the Sierra Sounds. Wow. That is just bone chilling.
Yeah, it kind of puckers you a little bit. But we're inside the shelter with our guns, and
Sure.
we're ready to shoot our way out if we have to. But you don't know, again, at that time, we didn't know if they was arguing with each other about who's going to come in after us, or if they were arguing about who's going to get the food that we left out, or just what it was all about. We just didn't know, and still don't know, but we suspect they were kind of arguing amongst themselves at the time. There was two of them, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You can tell how rapidly they speak. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just to us, of course, it sounds like a jumble of words, but there again, if anybody goes to a country where they're not familiar with the language, when the native speakers speak, it's not slow, it's quick and delivered, and it sounds like a jumble of sounds to us. So this is, I not that my opinion matters much, but it is complex. It's very complex.
Yeah, the cryptolinguist he's right into it now. This is a complex language, and he has been trained by the Navy as a cryptolinguist, retired from the Navy as a cryptolinguist. He teaches foreign languages now in Missouri, and he's got one of these guys that's got perfect hearing. He's a two-time graduate of the Language Institute of Foreign Language Institute in California, and he's made the statement they have a language, and he had to slow it down, I guess, to transcribe it, and he did transcribe a language out of it. So, and he was trained to pick out problems with languages, to foreign languages, you don't know what they are.
Right.
And anyway, that was unique. That was a really good step up again from Dr. Curlin's report from 1978, I think it was. Dr. Curlin, University of Wyoming, studied the sounds for a year, and he gave the credibility to them that they weren't manipulated. These were not slowed down. They were not speeded up. He had the original tapes. Al Berry let him have them, and they were not manipulated. They go below what the human can do. They are inside what a human can do, our language right now, and they go way above it, which suggests that they can make any sound they want to make. And I found that to be true. They can mimic just about anything you think you're hearing out there. What gives them away is the amplitude. They can't hide the lung capacity. They're very loud. And that'll jar you when they're right outside like that, I tell you.
I can imagine.
Shakes the walls of the shelter a little bit.
Yeah, and you hear that so often from people that are real close when those Sasquatch let loose. And it really does have a physiological effect on them. Like, it's not just, wow, that was really loud, I should turn that down. It truly affects the people in a very physical way.
Yeah. I've had some very strange things happen. We all have up there at the camp. And one of the things that happened was Warren Johnson and I, we knew one was out there. By then we were getting a little bit, we knew they weren't going to eat us. We didn't think they were. And we heard this thing jabbering out there. We thought, well, we'll jump outside this shelter door right quick and we might get a glimpse of it, run away at bright moonlit night. And we started walking up towards where that tree was, huge tree, and it has to be behind this tree right here. It didn't run away. So all of a sudden we just got froze in our tracks. I mean, just like a wall, a force field wall, like I related to a Star Trek force field, but
Right.
He looked at me and we were probably 15 feet apart and hadn't been talking. He said, I don't know about you, but I can't move. And I said, I can't either. I couldn't go forward. I mentioned this to a scientist later on. He says, we don't study fear. If that's your fear. I said, well, we weren't afraid. We were up there just thinking we was going to see this thing, and we realized they probably weren't going to harm us at that point. So he said, well, it has to be the infrasound or ultrasound or pheromones, he said. Infrasound or pheromones, because pheromones will only work within the same species. Infrasound will affect human emotion. It'll freeze you. It'll do just that. Hitler was working with infrasound in World War II anyway. And it's a unique thing that they probably have. Large animals have it. Elephants work in infrasound. Big tigers do. Giraffes do. Infrasound is you don't hear it, but you feel it. So I assumed it was probably infrasound they were working with. You talk about the frequencies they can get to. And but now that I think I've determined within my own head anyway that they are hybrids and they are part human, it might have been pheromones. Who knows? I just know I got froze and he did too. And it happened to me one other time out in the forest when I was walking along, not even thinking about Bigfoot. And I had that happen. Just all of a sudden you get stopped. You can't do anything. You're looking around trying to see what's causing this. You don't see anything.
Right.
Get the hair standing up on the back of your neck. It's one of those things. It is a good adventure, that's for sure.
That's got to be incredibly daunting to be frozen in place. Because you have to.
We could go backwards.
Oh, you could.
We could go backwards. We just couldn't go forward anymore. And again, it's probably done through frequency. That's what I'm guessing because of their really elevated vocal mechanism. They have something very unique. They've made sounds up there that you just could not imagine. And I talk about this in my first book. But anyway, we can go on from there, I guess. But
Sure. So next up, we're going to be revisiting another episode. This one's from season 2, episode 2 of the Paranormal Portal Podcast. And this is Yowie researcher Dean Harrison. And I do have to apologize a little bit. This was not our best recorded work. His microphone does sound a little bit muffled, but that was something that I should have taken better care and worked out prior to recording the show. But as I recall, it was just a race to get it all ready to go and on the air at the right time. So my apologies for that. But if you just slow down and put on some headphones, you kind of get used to it. So bear with me on that. Dean is an incredible, enigmatic person, and he's been at this for decades, not only researching Bigfoot, but also researching other cryptids and strangeness all over the world. So, but his main efforts have always been geared towards Australia Yowie research, and he's an incredibly powerful storyteller as well. I mean, when he explains what he's experienced, you really are there with him. He's just very, very animated and a powerful speaker. So give it a listen, and I know you're going to love it. And then after that, definitely go over and check out Dean's work on yowiehunters.com, which is their website. And that's also a repository, much like the BFRO, where Australian Yowie encounters have been recorded by people who've had them. So there's just so much to dig into here, but I hope you guys like it.
Yes, so this is probably one of the most
crucial stories in the journey that I've been on, and it's an incredible journey that you just couldn't imagine. So there's a town called Ormeau that I'd moved to in 1996. It was pretty close after I'd moved away from the first encounter, so to speak. And this is a semi-rural sort of setting. It's all acreage, and between the township of Ormeau, and Norfolk, which is the next one, there's a nature refuge, so to speak, that goes all the way across. Now, to the east is the highway, which hadn't been developed just then. At that stage, it was 2 lanes each way, and beyond that was cane field. To the west, you've got the mountains that go on pretty much forever, from the top end of Australia to all the way down to Victoria, so vast wilderness. I was trying to lose some weight at night, and in the process I was going for a jog, and this particular night I was going for a jog at 11 o'clock. The path that I used to jog on was through this nature reserve, and at the time it was pretty dense, and it was swampy, and there's creeks and all that sort of thing flowing through them. The track itself, you could put your hands out both sides and touch the foliage. That's how close it was. Prior to there, you walk down through a field. There's overhead high voltage power lines, and you walk down to the bush through the track. On this particular night, I got to the entrance of the track, and I stopped. I thought, I'll make a phone call before I go for my run. So I deviated, and I walked around the bush line behind a clump of trees to make a phone call. To the back of me, again, it's all mown grass up until the road behind me and an overhead street light. And it was a fair distance from the tree line to the road. And I was on the phone for probably about a good 5, 6, 10 minutes. I don't know, I can't remember. And she, with whom I was speaking, and this is a really odd part, she said, "What is all that noise? Makes no sense. How would I not hear this?" So I tuned out of the conversation, and sure enough, there's branches being felled. There's small saplings being broken over. And it just, to this day, it just makes no sense how I didn't hear all this commotion going on behind me. And I thought to myself, it's more than likely a bunch of kids that have snuck out at night, as I used to do when I was in my teens. And I thought, this is a Tuesday night. We used to do this Friday, Saturday nights. That's odd. And the noise sort of subsided. Okay, well, they found their way back out onto the track, back into the conversation, and talking away. And then there was a loud crack, a bit closer behind me. Back in the conversation. Crack, a little bit closer again. And now I'm rationalising and reasoning. There's one person still stuck in there, and he's trying to find his way out. His mates have left him, they've gone. Back in the conversation. And now I'm sort of semi-listening between the conversation and what's going on behind me. Now I'm aware of the leaves slowly being parted like that. And you hear the leaves going across, dragging across a body and then closing up behind. And then there'll be a twig break. And every time there was a twig break, silence, didn't move. This is stalking.
Wow.
This is with purpose. And so now I'm no longer interested in the conversation I'm having on the phone. I want to know more about this. And so now I'm totally tuned into it. And yeah, sure enough, I'm hearing a foot breaking a twig, and every time it broke a twig, silence. You give itself about 30 seconds just to clear the air. Like there's nothing here. And now I put my next foot down. And then you hear the leaves being parted again, etc. And now it's getting closer and closer and closer. And now it's really close. So I said on the phone, I said, I think I've got somebody trying to sneak up behind me. And she's saying, careful, all this sort of thing. I'm going, no, I just want to know, let's find out what's on his mind. Because at the time I was extremely fit and I was boxing. And I boxed and so forth all through my life. And I wasn't terribly concerned. And as it got right to the bush line just behind me, suddenly my whole body just shut down. And it was an experience that I'd never had before. It was foreign. Basically, I just locked up.
Wow.
Just locked. I was paralyzed. I guess that's the best word for it, is paralyzed. And, you try to psychoanalyze the situation. Is this a mind thing? It has to be. But why can't I move? And I've got this overwhelming fear coming in from behind. Like I'm feeling something. It's like I could feel an energy, basically. Put it that way. It's like an energy. And it wasn't a good energy. And my hair went up. I had goosebumps. And I just knew that I was in imminent danger. I also knew, and this is like let's just say a sixth sense sort of thing. I also knew not to turn around, not that I could, but not to make eye contact because it's going to make things exponentially worse. And I just knew I had to get out of there, but I was in a predicament because I couldn't move. And I just managed to sort of turn just a little bit and just enough to see the silhouette standing there, at least 8 feet tall. And I just got, oh Lord, what do I do? And I knew, I was basically, it was a time scale. I had no time. I had to do something. So I literally counted into my head, 1, 2, 3. You better move. 1, 2, 3, and I forced my shoulder, which forced my hip, which forced my knee, which forced my foot. And the moment my foot moved, this biggest raw bellow that you've ever heard in your life.
Wow.
It was enormous. And the first thing that came to my mind was lion.
Really?
That is the extent of the size of the diaphragm in this thing.
Right.
It was immense. And if you're thinking lion, you know what a lion sounds like when they roar. I know what a lion sounds like, but that's what it sounded like. And I've often described it as something in between a bear and a lion in one. It's that big booming effect. And all the dogs right around and all the acreages are just going bananas. And I was going, woof, and off I went, and I ran. And I was pretty quick, but I wasn't quick compared to this guy.
Right.
And he took off after me, and the bush line went around to my left and went up towards the road where the start of the track was, and mown grass up until the road and the street line. And I am running as fast as I can. He probably started about there or so. He's come right round behind me. He's taken the bush line, and as he's running, he's just crashing through everything. Just smashing through things like they weren't even there. You should have heard it. Just everything was coming down. He was felling everything. And if he wasn't doing that, you hear him self-propelling through the bush, and you hear the bushes bounce back into place. As he's running, you could hear every foot valve bipedal, boom, 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 and you hear him launch over logs, boom, boom. And every time he made a heavy foot valve, his diaphragm would bounce. He goes, whoa, like that. So whoa, whoa, type of thing as he's running. On top of that, whoa, whoa, he's bellowing at me. And you know the difference between, and particularly when you're in the bush, if someone's talking directly at you, or if they're looking this way and they're talking.
Right.
There's a difference in the sound.
Sure.
He didn't take his eyes off me the entire time. And now he's running beside me, like dead beside me. And he's looking at me the entire time. He's not watching where he's going. He's just smashing through everything. And he's yelling and he's this and that. And it was blood curdling. The aggression was so raw. It's like I've never seen anything like it, never experienced anything like it. And then he starts to run ahead of me. And at this stage, while he's beside me, because he caught me so fast, I'm running in a straight line. Mm-hmm. He's run from there all the way around the bush line, through bush that I couldn't walk through without falling over.
Wow.
And he's just smashed through the whole lot and done probably 3-4 times my speed. And now he's running level with me, and I've just gone, that's it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is it. This is it. This is it. I'm dead. Right? This is my last night. I am just about to die.
Right.
And I knew at that point that there was nothing I could do to save myself. There was nothing I could have held in my hand that would have protected me. I could have had a samurai sword and a baseball bat and all these other things that some people carry around. It wouldn't have done anything. This thing would have snapped my neck like a toothpick before I had time to scream. That's how powerful it was, and that's how peed off it was too. It was so annoyed, and when it was doing this, it was like it was personal.
Wow.
I mean, you felt it. It was this energy that was coming from this, went right through you. It was like he just killed its firstborn, and he knew exactly what it was thinking. He wanted me. And now he starts to run up ahead of me, and he started just past me. What's he doing? Because I thought at this stage that this is it. This is where I'm about to die.
Yeah.
And then he starts to run a little bit ahead of me. And oh crap, he's cutting me off. That's what he's doing. So I've gone that way, and he sort of lunged out a few steps. And thank God I was on open ground. I was coming up towards the street light. Oh. And he's turned around. I'm looking over my shoulder as I'm running up to the street light. And I get there, and he's turned around and he's walked back over to the bush, just at the entrance of this track. And he's turned around and just swallowed. He's just sitting there, just in the foliage. Just watching, and I'm going, did you just hear that?
Oh my God!
Oh wow! So that was a life-changing experience. When you go through an experience like that, and you really truly believe this is it, this is when you're going to die.
Yeah.
And by the hands of something like him, you want answers, don't you?
Sure.
And you really want answers. You can't let this go. And I knew exactly what it was. There was no doubt in my mind. But by the moment I'd reached that light pole, I knew exactly what he was.
Wow.
There was just no question whatsoever. And I know what it is. And I'm still getting goosebumps just talking about it now.
Yeah.
And so that really rocked me. It really scared me. And it was probably only 2 weeks after then I got pulled away from that property. I had to move to Sydney.
All right, folks, and last up for tonight, and it was done in no specific order. I mean, all of these segments stand on their own as incredibly powerful discussions about this amazing cryptid known as Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yowies. But this one is not really Bigfoot and Sasquatch, but it's definitely having to do with giants, which is incredibly rare to hear about. But this excerpt comes from season 1, episode 64 of the Paranormal Portal, and this is the Chronicles of Sasquatch. And Wes was kind enough to come on the show, and we talked about many of the clips and things from his show. Talked about Bigfoot a lot, But this was kind of an extra addition to the show, and this was before we got on the air. Wes and I were just chatting on Skype or whatever we recorded on, and he told me, oh, there's this one story, and I was like, oh my God. So I asked him, would you share that story? Now, this is apparently the first time this story was ever shared anywhere. Wes knew this gentleman and didn't publish it for a long time due to the guy's failing health. He was dealing with some kind of stage 4 cancer, unfortunately, and but he was a Viet Nam vet and living in Australia. And he told Wes this story because he wanted to know, was it Bigfoot that he saw? And upon Wes hearing the story, he's like, no, that wasn't Bigfoot. That sounds like you saw some giants. And it's a disturbing tale, to say the least, just with the graphic nature of what these people observed, both by these creatures and the aftermath of it. But it's one of those stories it just makes your heart ache that people have to see these kind of things, you know. But at any rate, again, this is season 1, episode 64. Now, with any of these clips, I hope to highlight these prior shows, but please feel free and go back to listen to the full-length interviews of each of these episodes and all of the other ones that are back there. There's literally hundreds of prior episodes of the Paranormal Portal, and my goal is that you'll go back and discover some of those. So this one, again, the Chronicles of Sasquatch, you know, buckle in for this one. This one's, again, kind of a heartbreaker, but I guess this stuff happens, folks. So let me know what you think. Let's take a look. You and I were also talking about this encounter that came out of Viet Nam, and I don't know how much time you have, if you have enough time, but I'd love for you to share that with our audience, if you would.
Yeah, of course. I got a phone call from a guy in Australia, and he's an ex-colonel, retired colonel in the military, and he calls me, and he sent me a bunch of messages on Facebook. And you know, Australia, when it's, I don't know, 9 here, 9 in the morning, it's like midnight there the next day. So it's hard to figure out the time zone difference. Anyway, we got it nailed down, and he wanted to ask me, he said, I ran into something in Vietnam, and he goes, that's one of the main reasons why I'm in Australia. And he said, you know, he hates the U.S. government. He felt like he was a lab rat for them. It took him a long time to figure that out. So anyway, he moved to Australia. Well, this guy's dying of cancer. And I could just hear it in his voice when I spoke with him. My dad died of cancer. My grandfather died of cancer. And you can always hear it in a man's voice when they don't have much time left. Very nice man. And there's a reason why I didn't put him on the air. He's taking a lot of different medications for the cancer, and the audience can be rough at times. And so because he's going through what he's going through, I didn't want to add any more pressure on top of this man. But he starts telling me the story, and he goes, what I'm about to tell you, we're talking over Skype, and he goes, what I'm about to tell you is classified. I'm not, and immediately I'm like, oh, Jesus, why did, I don't really, and I almost kind of cut him off because I was like, I don't want, I have a family too, guy, you know what I mean? And so he starts to tell me, he said, when I was in Vietnam, he was part of the special forces. And there was an area, he went on and on about Vietnam. He said, Vietnam is the worst place on the planet. He said, it's just the worst place on the planet. It's hot, it's humid, it's hell on earth, really. And so he's telling me this story. And so they're over in Vietnam. They get called out to do a special operation, and they're in the briefing room or whatever it is. There's an area in Vietnam that was a no-go place. The UN had made this area in Vietnam to where the U.S. wasn't allowed there. There was no military action. It was like a buffer zone. And they were going to go into that area, which is highly illegal. He knew it was illegal. And so he's sitting in this briefing room, and there's other people that are going to go along with this mission. And he said, Wes, I'd never seen anything like that. He goes, when you're in a special forces group operation, you have your guys and you rely on your guys. And it's like you go in to do these black ops, these different operations to where they may or not be legal. But it's like a surgical knife. You go in there, you do your job, and then you leave. You're almost like a ghost. And he goes, the worst thing you can do is take along people with you. Well, these people were coming along, a couple Air Force guys, I think there was a Navy guy, and he couldn't figure out why they were coming along. So anyway, and he goes, the other weird part is we were armed to the teeth. Special Operations is armed to the teeth, but this was up and beyond what we normally go in with. And he goes, and we had a tank, which made no sense. Because if you're going to go into an area where you're not supposed to be, it's highly illegal. The last thing you want to do is roll in with the tank. Because, everyone's going to see you. They start going into this area and they come upon this village. The reason why they went into this area was to kill some of the Viet Nam rebel soldiers that were in the area. And he said none of this made any sense to him, but whatever. And he goes, when you're told to do something in the military, you do it. You don't sit and question, it's not up for debate. And even though we live in a democracy, military is not a democracy, so you do what you're told. So they go into this area, and he said, we're just outside the village, and all of these Vietnam rebel soldiers show up. And they all have their guns above their head, holding it above their head like they're surrendering. And he wasn't buying it. He said, these people do not surrender one bit. He said, it's always a trap. 110% of the time, they're looking to kill you. And there's no honor in them because they don't surrender. They'll fight to the death. Well, these guys all come out of the bush. And he said there's about 20 of them. And they're all holding their rifles above their head. And he has a translator, a Vietnamese translator with them. And he goes, if you want, you can talk to her. She was there. She saw what happened, and she speaks pretty good English. These guys come out of the bush, and one guy's in charge. So all the American soldiers all have their rifles on these guys, ready to kill them. And so he orders his men, stand down for a moment. The main guy comes out, starts talking to the translator. She has this confused look on her face. And she looks at him, and I forget what he said. She said something to him, and he goes, I don't understand what you mean. And then she tried to explain it again. He goes, I have no clue what you mean. And she said, basically what he's saying, it doesn't translate to English, but basically what he's saying is there's monsters by the village, and they want the U.S.'s help in killing these monsters. So he starts laughing. He's like, this is the most ridiculous. Monsters, huh? You guys are all afraid of monsters. So he starts giving them crap. And the soldier, and he said the only reason why he didn't execute every one of them was they looked terrified. These guys looked absolutely terrified. And he said, and I think he even told me one of the soldiers had actually peed himself. And so something wasn't right. He couldn't put his finger on what was going on. The main guy on the rebel force comes forward and basically says, listen, if you help us, we'll be your prisoners. We'll surrender. We'll go with you guys. And about that time, the village erupts. There's people screaming, women and children. Everyone's trying to get out of the village, and there's gunfire. And he said he heard something else that was very odd. He said it sounded like a lion roaring. All the rebel soldiers pick up their gun or their rifles, and they point it towards they're just outside of this village, point it in that direction. And all the U.S. soldiers, he kind of tells his men, well, don't shoot them. They're not pointing their guns at us. Let's find, and it's mass confusion, absolute mass confusion. He said, I had no clue what was going on. And he said, outside of this village, there was 2 of these things. And he asked me if I thought it was Sasquatch. And keep in mind, this guy's breaking down in tears about he would talk for 5 or 6 minutes and then break down in absolute tears. And he would tell me, can you give me just like 5 minutes? I need to compose myself. Well, finally, he tells me what he saw was he saw a male and a female giant. And he said they were hairy, but they didn't look like the Patterson-Gimlin film. He said they looked very human-like. And I think he said they had red hair, but they were hairy. both the female and the male, and he said they were just giants. He said they were just huge beings. He said when the male would scream or roar, he said it sounded like a lion on steroids. It was enough to freeze you in your place. And keep in mind, these are, I respect the military, but when you start getting into special forces, these are highly trained killers that don't get shook up by much. Right. These guys were shook up, and he said they had the female and the male both had canines coming out of their mouth. He said their jaws were just huge beings. And he said the male was knocking over trees. He said one of the males grabbed a little girl, and he just broke down in tears. And I was like, okay, well, tell me what happened. And he said, it could have been my granddaughter. I mean, now being an old man looking back, it broke his heart seeing this. He said that the male grabbed one of the children, picked her up. She's screaming for her life, crying, and he bit her head off and then threw her body. And he said the female was doing the same thing. She would grab men and just rip them apart, rip their arms off, rip their legs off, rip their heads off. And he said it was something out of your worst nightmares. He'd never seen anything like this before, never heard of anything like this before. So all the Viet Nam rebel soldiers start shooting. All the Americans start shooting. 20 minutes earlier, these guys would have killed each other. Now they're on the same team trying to kill this thing. And he said, we're all shooting at it. He goes, I know I hit the male several times. He goes, I know I hit that thing. Didn't even phase it. And he said they were so fast when they ran through the trees and just outside the village. He said you could barely get a shot off on one of them because they were so quick the way they ran. And he goes, it was almost impossible how fast they were moving. Tank couldn't get a shot off because the tank, it couldn't, they were moving too fast. So he calls in air support, and these gunships come in. The gunships gun down the big male, and they also hit the female. They mortally wound the female, but she's not dead. So they walk up cautiously to the male, realize he's gone, he's dead, and the female's trying to crawl to the male. And he said the whole time the female's crawling to the male, she was chattering this weird language, almost like she was cussing them out, but they couldn't understand what she was saying. Mm-hmm. And he said, that Sierra sounds that you always play. He goes, that where the male's going, rah, rah, rah. He goes, that's what it sounded like. He goes, that's exactly what they sound like. That same weird language where it's like a samurai chatter. And he said, so they walk up to the female and she's cussing them out. She's, he goes, she was just nasty, just a nasty being. He didn't even know what they were. And the soldiers were going to shoot her. So he commanded everyone not to shoot her. And he told one of the guys, go get the flamethrower. Because they just watched this female kill all these kids, women, men, old people. And he goes, I'm going to burn this bitch alive. And he told one of his soldiers to go and light her up. And they lit her up. And she burned. And he said it took her a while to die, but she was screaming. And he said we just sat and watched her burn. And he said all the people that were embedded with us, what really pissed them off is all of a sudden they magically, are pulling out measurements. They seem like they know what they're doing. And he's wondering the whole time, you're putting my men's lives in danger by you guys coming along. Now all of a sudden magically you guys know what's going on. And I can't remember if the male was 18 feet or 16 feet tall. I want to say 16 feet tall is what he told me. It could have been 18. I'll have to go back and look at my notes. And he said the female, I think the male was 18, the female was 16 feet tall. And he said they couldn't even move them. They weighed so much. And he said they looked very human-like. And I asked him about the giant in Kandahar, the Kandahar giant. Right. And he'd never heard that story. And I said, you might want to go look that up. And he told me they looked very human-like. So anyway, they bring in the transport helicopters and they wrap up the male. He said the transport helicopter has 2 rotors on it. He called it by whatever the military calls it. I never served, so I don't know. And he said the guy taking off really had to rev the engine on those rotors to even get off the ground. And then they collected what was left of the female. And he said what really pissed him off is they get another order. In the next order, there's a cave on the other side of this village. They were ordered to take the tank and go blow up that cave because that's where the rest of them were. So they go over there, and he said by the time the rest of the he said those guys that were there, all the Viet Cong or Vietnamese rebels, he said they had just faded way back into the bushes. He didn't even know where they went when it was done. They weren't sticking around. And he said, so they go to this cave and they find the cave. He said it was this huge cave just outside of the village. They didn't see anything, but he said you could hear him in there chattering back and forth. That blah, 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 and you hear him running around in the back. So they took the tank and demolished the cave. You know, he said it's bothered him his whole life, and he wanted to know if that is what Sasquatch was. And I told him, I don't think you ran into Sasquatch, boss. I think you ran into something else. It sounds more like the Kandahar giant is what you ran into, the Nephilim. And then, you know, I've heard of accounts in Alaska. I've heard of accounts in the Middle East. And why wouldn't they be in Viet Nam?
Sure.
But it was fascinating. And he told me, he said, the only reason why I'm telling you this, he goes, Wes, I'm going to be dead soon. So if they come kill me, they'd be doing me a favor by putting a bullet in the back of my head. He goes, because I'm going to die anyway. So... But the account was fascinating. It was really fascinating to talk with him and talk about this experience and what he went through. And he told me, he said, if you want, the translator lady's still alive. She's an old woman now. She lives in Viet Nam, speaks great English. She was there. And a lot of his men, he told me, had committed suicide over the years. So most of his men are dead, but the translator's still alive. And I wasn't sure what to make of it. You know, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I know. And I'm thinking as soon as you started telling that story, I'm like, Giant of Kandahar. But, you know, in that situation, it seems like their patrol route for the Giant of Kandahar went by that cave. Like they were trying to elicit a response. And then the other team had to go because the first team kind of disappeared. And in this case, they were told to go into an area for one reason. And, you know, it's like, is there a government awareness of where these things are, and they just keep wanting to capture and study and capture and study, so they keep putting people in harm's way? You know, I mean, it just seems really weird that that story would repeat itself, you know, on two different continents.
Yeah, and I think with him, he was so upset. He felt like he was bait, like the U.S. government set him up as bait, and it really pissed him off. And he said, you know, he thinks most of his men committed suicide because of this, of what they had seen. And I mean, talking to him, the guy broke down several times. My heart really went out when I was talking to him. I really felt bad for him. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us today. So hope you guys enjoyed the show, and thank you again so much for all your love and support. And remember, if you want to follow the Paranormal Portal, probably the easiest way is to head over to paranormalportal.net. And that's the homepage for the Paranormal Portal. And you'll find links to all of our different social media and sites and information about the shows, including our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/paranormalportal. Or just look for Paranormal Portal on Google or whatever search engine, and you'll find links to our social media such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So we're kind of all over the place, and we're spreading as well as we can. But anyway, thank you so much for the love and support. You all take care, and remember, we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. Until next time.